VBA. Okay, so we have this file here. Oh, interesting. This is on the home. Yeah, go to the home. Yep, unit 2. And if you remember, what we had first was we had a loop. And what we're trying to do here is we have this data. You can imagine if this is like from an old library system or an old database system. And we have ISBN numbers for books, their titles, and the author here. Here's the author, here's a book name, here's an ISBN. And the goal here is the real goal is to be able to use some of these decision making, some of these logic, right? Some of these if statements. And we're going to use this data to do some of that. So let's create this loop again. And maybe the first thing we want to do is just loop through everything. And that loop is going to give us the opportunity to take line by line, correct. And for example, we want to take out these dashes. We want to take out some of these HTML tags and kind of split out the title from the author, those kinds of things. Some pretty basic text manipulation. But the first step is a loop. So let's do a loop. Let me do a sub process data. How about that? We'll just call it process data. And I'll keep track of our row. So I'll do a row dim r as long for a row number. And I want to start here with row 1. So this is not one where we're starting with the active cell. I specifically want to go start with row 1. There's no header. So that would be row 2 if there's a header. In this case, we'll start with row 1. And we're going to do a do loop. And here's our do in our loop. I like to do a do events right when I create that. Do events. That helps us get out of unending loops. Um, but I have to tell it at what point do we want to stop the loop, right? So at what point do we stop? Well, we're going to start at row 1. So one option is I could count the rows and say do until this many rows. The flexibility of doing it, please. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Rows 1. We'll start at the top. I'm not going to use my active cell, right? My active cell could be anywhere, so I'll start with row 1.
Maybe then you have to say do until active cell is blank.
Yeah, perfect. We'll classify that a little bit more. We want to use the cells command because the cells allows us to control which row we're on, right? So if we do until cells R is going to be the row, and I'm just going to use the column 1. Do until that cell value is equal to blank. Okay, and if we do that, we're hoping that it goes through all of these cells all the way down to basically every row until it gets to the end, right? Right now, how many do we have? I'm at 95 rows. So when it gets to 96, we'll have to blank. The benefit of doing this is that if we had data that added to this list, we wouldn't have to come back and change our do loop, right? If we added some more books or whatever, right? If we pulled some more books from a different database or wherever we got this data, we could keep this the same without having to change for the number of rows. So we can do as many rows as they want. Does that make sense? Which is nice. So this do until cells R is the row, comma 1 is the column, dot value equals blank. Okay, great. And I think this is where we left it. Maybe we did one more thing. We need to augment, what do you call it? Increment. We need to increment the R. And we do that inside the loop. And frequently we can do that at the end. We could do it at the beginning. We could put it right underneath the do statement, but I'll just do it at the end. Okay, so this is going to give us a basic loop. And just to make sure, we could come in here and say, hey, let's just make sure this is doing what we want it to do. Let's do a debug. Where's my D? Debug.print. And let's just print something. What should we print? Let's print the row. Um, let's let's go ahead and print the cell's value. Cell R1 dot value. And again, the debug print is just going to print that up here in the immediate window, right? So when I run this sub, we should see basically we're just printing column one's value, right? So we should just see all these ISBN numbers, 95 of them, and the row number, bless you, in a list up here. We should not see column B. We're just pulling from column A here, the first column. It's column one. So let me run this. Boom, there we go. I've got the row, each row number, and the ISBN. Okay, so this is good. This is a good sign. Tell your neighbor you're there. Neighbor, I'm here. Neighbor, I got this. And we could do anything here. I mean, it doesn't have to be the ISBN. We could just do the row number. All I'm looking for is something to see that, yeah, something to check. Okay, great. We're good. Do you have any window open? Any other message open? Throw the computer down, jump on it 3 times, and then restart it. You could save and open it back up again. See if there's something glitching out. Okay, I want to go to the next level here, and I want to take us to I want to create a function. I want to do a function that allows us to remove these dashes from this number. So a function, and we'll find out more about functions in the coming weeks. This is kind of a preview of what's coming up. Let's create a function just like we create a sub. So we do a sub, and we give it a name, and we give it parentheses, right? What's different here is that the function is going to return data to us. So after it runs, it's going to return data. Does that make sense? Basically, where I'm going here is I'm going to call a function here. It's going to be like numbers only. And I'm gonna put in this cells value that we've just been looking at, right? And I want it to return to this sub just the numbers from this value. That's where we're going to go. Does that make sense? So I'm saying, I want you to call this function numbers only. I'm creating a function down here, and I want you to return just the numbers. I'm going to send it everything in that cell, right? That whole number, I'm going to send it to this function, and I want you to return, boom, just the numbers. That's where we're going. Interestingly enough, what we do here is we have to define some variables in and out of the function. So what we're going to do is, let's call it data. And we're going to define it as a string. Okay, so what this means is we're going to send this function a value. And this is the value we're going to send. This function is going to treat that value that it receives as a string. That's what this inside the parentheses is. Oh, you're sending me information? Okay, I'm going to consider that a string. I'm going to handle that as a string. And then what we do is we assign the return value a type of data as well. So at the end of this, we say we're going to return the data to you as a string. Pretty cool, right? So we're identifying the value that's coming in. We're identifying the value that's going out as part of this function. And then what do we do inside the function? I mean, potentially what we're going to do is we're going to create numbers. Um, the way to return the data at the end of a function is to call the function name, actually, interestingly enough. So if we wanted to return this data from this function, we actually call the function's name inside the function. Is that weird? It's a little bit weird, right? But it's saying, okay, the output of this function we're going to return back here is these numbers. So for example, if you've got this function so far in your code, we can actually call that up here. We can say numbers only. And let's say that I call a string 1, 2, 3, 4, exclamation point, right? What do you think this is going to return? It's a good guess. It's actually going to return 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because we're just telling it to return this. We actually haven't done anything with the data that it's sending us, right? We're just saying, send me back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We just wrote that in here. I just wrote that in kind of as a placeholder, as a way to say, okay, we're going to do something up here, and then at the end, we're going to send you back a number, because we haven't done anything with this data yet. But that's what we need to do. So let's see. Let's do something with this data. Let's do a couple things here. What we need to do is, as in terms of the function, we need to look at every character inside this value, right inside these cells, each one of these, and we're going to check to see if each character is a number. And if it's not a number, we'll ignore it. We'll get rid of it. If it is a number, we'll keep it. Okay, so that's where we're going to go. And so let me do this with a couple of variables. Let's do x as an integer. That'll be our counter through the value. So we'll do x as integer. Let's dim one character, and I'm just kind of making up names here. This doesn't have to be anything specific, as a string. So this is the character that we're going to look at individually, right? We're going to look at the 9 first. Here's a 9. Then we're going to look at the 8, then the 9, then the dash. So we'll do one character as a string. By the way, if I do multiply times 1 there, then what I'm saying is just give me one character in that string. Just allocate one space for that string. So I could do it with, it doesn't have to be with it, but I'll do with in this case because we're just doing one character. And then I want another way to keep track of the answer. How do we know what we're going to keep and what we're not going to keep? And I'll just dim temp as a string. So those are the three things we're going to create. And then I'm going to do a for loop, because we need to go through each character in this value. So I'll do for, well, let me do this first. On the numbers only, I'm going to take this out. I'm not going to return these numbers. I'm going to return whatever our temp is at the end of this. Does that make sense? We're going to create a new string without the dashes, and we're going to send that back up to return to the sub above. So I'm going to do numbers only equals temp, because that's what's going to go back after the function is complete. But let's do a for loop. We'll do for x is equal to 1. And we're going to go to the length of the data. So this is the first time we're using the data that's coming into the numbers only function. This is where we're going to use it. We want to know the length is. What is the length of that data? What's the length of that string? That's how many times we're going to do this. I'm going to do a next underneath my for loop, just to increment the x. Inside of that loop, I'm going to say one character, and I'm going to extract that from the data. I'm going to start, and this is an interesting one. I'm going to start at x, character x. Does that make sense? Why do I want to start at character x? The first character in that string. Yeah, that 9, the beginning of that number, right? And then that loop is going to iterate to the second character, right? So I'm using mid as a function to start whichever number of character we're at. That's what that X is. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think that's what you meant. Am I close? Okay, I think that's what you. And then what's the length that we're going to take out? That's it. We're just going to take one. We're going to take one character at a time. So mid's powerful, right? My kids say mid. What do they say mid about? I say, hey, how you doing? Mid. Mid to medium. And then sometimes they say meh. Is that the same thing? Oh, that's less than mid. Meh is less than mid. What's above mid? Oh wait. Oh, okay. I have to say this. One of my daughters said I was supposed to say this in class today. W- What what the sigma? Do you guys know what that means? Okay, me neither. That's not swearing, is it? What's the standard deviation? Sorry, I got distracted. Question.
So what? So we have this. Like, if you do this way, well, like, let's stop me from just downloading this into Power BI and replacing the dash.
There's lots of different ways to do it. You want to race?
I'm good, but I was just saying, like, I feel like that would be quicker, but I don't know. That's what we're doing in business analytics.
Oh, cool. That's great. Yeah, that's true. You could also do like a text to cells and then recombine it. I mean, there's a couple different ways to do it, right? This one you can think of as kind of something that you have to automate, something that happens I mean, I guess you could do that with Power BI too. Um, I agree. There's more than one ways to do this. If you're looking for speed and efficiency to do exactly what we're doing, this may not be the best way to do it. But if you can imagine that this is part of a larger ecosystem of automation, then it makes a little bit more sense why we would we don't have to do it this way, Brother Chad. But yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair comment. Um, any other questions, comments? Alan, you're scratching your head. I can see something brewing. Okay. Do you know what sigma means? I mean, aside from the mathematical term, just curious. I guess I could look it up, but okay. So now what we've done is we've created this loop, right? This is our function. We've created a loop. We've created one character. We're going to go extract each character from that thing, and then we got to figure out if it's numerical. Okay. So here's where we're going to do the logic, right? We did all this setup just to do this logic. Maybe it's a little bit too much to your point, Turn. Here's the logic. There is a function called is numeric. So we can do an if statement. If is numeric, and what are we checking to see if it's numeric or not? This is the one character. If that is equal to true, then what do we do? Is that a question or are you?
No, I gotta say something, but finish.
Oh, okay.
Is that true that we replace with what?
Then we want to keep it, right? Then we kind of want to keep it. So then what we could do is we could say, let's add it to our temp string. We want to keep it. Okay. In fact, we could do temp is equal to whatever the previous temp was. And we're going to concatenate our character, right? So temp starts out as blank when we set it up here, right? It's a string. We set it up. There's memory on the computer that's assigned to this variable. It's blank currently the first time we go through. And so if the first character is numeric, then we're going to add it to temp. And then we're gonna go next. What if it's not? What's that? No, no, no. What were you gonna say? Guess. Uh, there is an else. We could do an else. We don't even need it, right? We're not even gonna do anything. We're gonna let it go. We're gonna say, see ya. We're just gonna go to the next character, which is fine. We'll just iterate the loop. Boom. Okay, great. So this is one way to do the if statement. We could also do a couple of changes here, right? One is, do we really need to use this equals true here? Right? When we look at this statement here, everything between the if and the then, this needs to evaluate as Boolean. Okay, it needs to evaluate true or false. But this statement right here is actually going to evaluate as true or false. How about that? Just by itself. So we actually don't need the equals true here. We can take that out. We can say, if this is true, then do this. Right? That makes sense. Okay, good. Notice this is all in one line. Another change we could do is, if we wanted to, we could say, hey, let's put this on multiple lines. We could do that too, right? We could say, if it's true, then do this, but then we also have to add at the end here, we have to add an end if, right? We have to close off the end if. So either one of those is fine. Either one of those works. You can leave it on one line. You can put it on two. It's up to you, whichever one you like. But before we do that, before we make, what we could also do, if we want it to be really cool, is we could say, okay, let's debug this again. Debug print, and let's debug print our temp. What is our temp? Okay, in fact, let's do this. Let's pull this outside of the if statement, and we'll put it in here inside the loop. Okay, so we can see as this thing is progressing, we can figure out what that temp is. We can see it up here. So let's just run this so far and see how we go. How are we going to run this? Well, we actually have to call it, right? Function, sorry, what's the name? Numbers only, and we're going to send it a string. Can I just copy this over here for a minute? Can I just grab one of these? And let me put it in quotes to make sure it's a string. And what we're doing is we're calling the numbers only function. We're sending in this information as a string, and let's see what happens. Ready? Okay, wait a minute. That went fast. Okay, look at that. So what it did is it took that first character, the 9, and it went through this loop. Is 9 numeric? True, then add it to temp, and then print temp. So we can see how temp is growing every time it runs through this loop until we get to the very end, and it's numbers only. Hey, not bad. All right, tell your neighbor, I got this, neighbor. Tell him. Or say, neighbor, I don't like sitting next to you. I'm not going to sit next to you next semester. It's over between us. I mean, you can say that too. It probably won't help your peer evaluation score, but at least you're honest. Points for honesty.
Really chat.
Yep.
Find out what's the signal.
Oh, what is it?
I chatted it up. See, that's the new word, I chat.
You chatted. Does that mean you asked somebody, or is that ChatGPT? Okay. Chatted it up.
So first I said, so what does the sigma mean? And then it gave me like all the,
Yeah, I knew that one.
I said, what the sigma mean in slang?
Okay.
Right? And
I guess I could
it
look it up.
said, in slang, sigma can refer to someone who is seen as an index of reliance on. This is often in contrast to the alpha or beta personality. So did he say this in front of you
Yeah, my daughter told me to say this.
while looking at you? Like, so what
Yes.
does that entail?
Yeah, I don't know either. She's only 12. I mean, maybe.
Hey, 12-year-olds are smart.
12-year-olds are smarter than me. There's some truth to that.
I don't know.
Yeah, interestingly enough, if I'm inside the function and I hit F5 or I hit the play bar, it's looking for a macro, right? It's not looking for, it won't let you run the function because the function requires an input, right? It requires an input. So that's why you have to run it from the command, the media window, or you can run it from this loop, right? So now what we can do is we have this here and we can run it in this macro and it's going to give us back the numbers only for each value.
So when I'm trying to run this in the video, I'm just gonna follow along with your whole deal here, so I don't want to get.
Do you have this one?
Oh.
Okay, yeah, check that one. Okay, question. What is your O capitalized up here? On the function name? Let me keep going. If you guys have some errors, ask your neighbors. If not, we can touch base after class. All right. Unfortunately, I'm not that smart to solve all the problems as fast as. I'm not quite there yet. But you could do ask ChatGPT maybe. I wonder if that's okay. But so what I was going to say is all we did so far is we've just passed this to the function. We actually haven't done anything with it in this parent sub, right? So we're calling the function. Now that we get that information back from the numbers only, we need to put that somewhere, right? Where should we put it? Let's put it in, let's just put it in cells. How about like column C? Can we do that? So let's do cells. We're still using the R because we're doing our row by row up here. And we can do this. We can do double quote C dot value is equal to the return of that function. Does that make sense? So we had this function numbers only cells R1 value that we're passing to this function. When it comes back, we're going to put this right in the spreadsheet. Column C, whatever row we're on, right? R is the row. It's going to put it in right there, right next to the next column. And it should go all the way down. So should we try this? I'm inside the sub. I'll click on F5. Woo-wee, look at that. What is this, Brother Chapman? What just happened? Is anything wrong? Look at that. It went through all that debug. What's the E plus 12? It's just scientific notation. That's it. That's it. Making it wider. Wait a minute. That didn't help. For each row. Exactly right. Right? It just went through 95 rows and it took out all the dashes for every number 1 through 95 and spit it back in column C. That's black magic. That's called black magic. No, that's exactly right. Is that what you're asking? That's exactly right. The only thing here is it's just a formatting issue, right? So the way to do that, I think, is if you go to, what is it, number. If you go to number and then decrease decimals, because I think the default's 2. And then if you do the, what is it, the paint, where's my paint? Format painter, do the whole column, and you will see that those are the same numbers over here. How about that? Hey, not bad, right? Not bad. Okay, anybody didn't get it? How many people haven't, how many people got it? Should we say that? One? Wait, we're down to one? Two? One and a half? Okay, yeah, let's review the function. So I have function numbers only, data as string as the input, and then as string as the output. I have three variables that I've created as integer, as string, as string. Then I have a for loop, right? Here's my for loop. For x equals 1 to length data, right? And then I have a one char, this is my one character, equals mid data comma x comma 1, right? I'm just extracting one. If I wanted to see if that was the right one, I could do a debug print here, and I could just see, okay, just make sure, let me make sure I'm getting one char from my debug print, right? You could do that if you wanted to troubleshoot that. Then I have a if is numeric statement here inside of my for loop, right? Here's my for loop. Inside of that is my if statement. If this is numeric, one char, then temp equals temp, and this can't be plus, it has to be ampersand, one char, right? We're concatenating, it's concatenating. And that's ending my if statement. And then I debug print the temp. I actually don't need that anymore, so I could comment that out. And then I'm closing my for loop with the next. And then I'm sending my temp, my final temp, to numbers only, which is saying that's what I want you to return after this function is done. Send that back up. So numbers only equals temp. I'm going to send that back up to this function that we called, and it's going to return that